On the way to deliver takeout, I received a call from my girlfriend, who was drunk. So I put down the overdue order and rushed to find her. But when I arrived, limping, she cheered, having won a bet. Later, she stumbled to my doorstep, intoxicated. But I shut her out. Because that night, she had already made me lose. Chapter 1. At 2 in the morning, there weren't many riders still taking orders. I had accumulated orders from 3 blocks away and raced all the way. Just then, I received a call from my girlfriend, Teresa. As soon as I answered, I heard the deafening noise of a nightclub. "Howell, I'm drunk." There were still 50 meters left on the order, and I intended to make her wait patiently. But in the background, I heard a man's playful laughter, saying, "Miss, you're so drunk, let me take you." Before he could finish his sentence, I hung up. I immediately turned the car around. But in a moment of carelessness, I collided head-on with another vehicle. My leg burned instantly, and blood dripped down. But when I hobbled to the entrance of the bar, I saw Teresa laughing joyfully. She was about to collapse into the arms of another man. "Howell, I'm here." When she saw me, Teresa waved excitedly and ran over. I anxiously brushed off the dust from my body and opened my arms to embrace her. But she simply passed by me and headed straight for my delivery car. "What are we betting on this time?" I turned my head. Only then did I notice her friends, who had gathered around closely. "Let's bet on how many orders got messed up." Teresa clapped her hands in excitement. "Sounds good. I guess 5 orders. I guess 3. Then I'll go with 1. One after another, her friends placed their bets. No one noticed the growing darkness on my face. When the delivery box was opened, it was already in complete chaos. "Ah! I won again." Teresa jumped up in excitement, as if she had won the most glorious prize in the world. I immediately opened a bottle of champagne and celebrated. There's no way around it. My Howell loves me so much. "When you heard that I might be taken by some smelly guy, you should have come flying over." She hummed a tune happily while collecting the money. In no time, a stack of 5,000 bills was handed to me. "Baby, you take this, it's what you deserve." This wasn't the first time. Whether it was that bottle of champagne or this stack of red paper, it was all something I couldn't earn even if I worked hard for a month. Silently, I calculated the fines for being overdue. I didn't know what expression to make. The sprayed alcohol landed on my bruised leg. It stung and brought me back to reality. I stuffed the stack of money back into her hands. "Since you're fine, I'll go back." Teresa's smile froze instantly. "Are you angry?" She gently approached me. "Don't be mad, I just wanted you to accompany me." I let go of her coquettish hand. "Stop joking around, I have to rush back." I pushed my old beat-up car, trying to leave as if nothing had happened. But the bike chain, broken at some point, shattered my last shred of dignity. 1 try. 2 tries. I exerted all my strength, but the wheels remained motionless. Teresa coldly snorted. Disappointment filled her tone. "Why can't everyone just have a good time? Why do you have to be a clown?" The crowd fell silent. All eyes focused on me in an instant. She kicked the dilapidated electric bike, and it crashed to the ground. "Say something. Why are you ignoring me? Is this broken bike more important than me?" A pedal flew off, lying alone on the ground. When I borrowed the bike from my roommate, I had promised to take good care of it. But now, in this state, no matter how much I try to repair it, it can never return to its original condition. My fingernails dug into my flesh. I swallowed the bitter humiliation and carried the bike away. Teresa, who had been abandoned for the first time, was completely overwhelmed. "If you leave now, don't ever come back." I paused for a moment. But ultimately, I didn't turn back. Chapter 2. When did I start living in such a miserable state? It was probably during my junior year Christmas. Teresa said she wanted to go to Iceland. She said, "Howell, let's go to Iceland to see the Northern Lights next Christmas. They say that lovers who make wishes under the Northern Lights will be together forever." At that moment, I looked at her face full of anticipation. I thought to myself, maybe I should start preparing a ring. But when I found out that a plane ticket to Iceland would cost $30,000, I hesitated. That was far beyond my yearly living expenses. I couldn't help but doubt if I could really give her the life she wanted. After being downcast for half a month, I mustered the courage to be honest with her. "Teresa, I can't go to Iceland. But I hope that when we graduate, we can go to Tibet together." That was a distant dream within reach. She had a momentary look of surprise, then kindly agreed. I carefully calculated. Weekend tutoring, plus delivering food at night. In just 6 months, I could save up enough money for Tibet. And the remaining 6 months would be enough for me to save up for a decent diamond ring. I tried my best to give her the best. Since then, almost all of my free time was dedicated to work. To the point that I don't know when Teresa started to drift further away from me. The phone rang. I snapped out of my thoughts. It was Yuyan, Teresa's roommate. Howl, Teresa didn't return to the dorm last night, and I can't reach her. Remind her to attend the afternoon presentation. Ever since she started school, Teresa's family had bought her a third-year apartment off campus. She hardly stayed in the dormitory. So Yuyan's phone calls were usually just a gesture of goodwill. In the past, whenever we had a disagreement, I would be the first to comfort her. Otherwise, she would conspire with her roommate and force me to comply. I went back to the station to deal with the fine. The station manager scolded me mercilessly. I probably can't continue doing this job in the short term. After everything was settled, it was already lunchtime. I bought some vegetables on the way and hurried to Teresa's place. Along the way, I couldn't help but think about last night's Teresa. Maybe she loves me, that's why she resents me. Once she sobers up, she will naturally soften towards me. I convinced myself like that at the doorstep. I planned to cook her a 3-course meal. But when the door opened, everything shattered my imagination. Teresa pushed the man away in panic. They were both fully dressed, yet so intimately entwined. Howl. Let me explain. The man stumbled off the couch, in a daze and unable to stand straight. I knew him. He's Teresa's childhood friend, Charlie. Ever since he returned from abroad last year, he had been clinging to Teresa. Like a persistent fly, unable to be swatted away. Charlie kindly walked me home yesterday. We were both drunk and just collapsed. We were fully clothed. Nothing happened. Yes. Clearly, nothing happened. The more she explained, the more powerless she seemed. I struggled to hold back my tears, refusing to let them fall. With every ounce of anger rushing to my head along with my blood. It completely drove me to lose my sanity. I swung my fist. Blood immediately trickled from the corner of Charlie's mouth. But in the next second, Teresa rushed to his side, tenderly covering his face. Howl, have you gone mad? I told you there was nothing between us. What else do you want? You're asking me what I want? I looked at the person in front of me in disbelief, not knowing when they had become so unfamiliar. Tears finally fell. The Halloween in Las Vegas last year, New Year's in Vancouver. Even this year's Lantern Festival in Japan. Dare you tell me that he hasn't been with you? Whenever we went on trips, Teresa would always generously take photos of everyone together. But she intentionally cropped out someone's figure. Of course, she wouldn't dare to admit it. Those places where I was absent, Charlie filled them one by one. Slap. A hot slap landed on my face. Pain pierced through my heart. Teresa roared, if you weren't always absent. Do I need to find someone else to accompany me? Howl, you only care about your fragile ego. Have you ever thought about me? Why is it always me who has to accommodate you? But I just wanted to work hard for our future. Is there something wrong with that? Charlie disdainfully patted my shoulder. Can you give her the future she wants? Can you? In the past, when I wasn't here, now that I'm back, there's no room for you anymore. His contempt, like a hammer, fell heavily on my heart, making it hard for me to breathe. I clenched my fist and attacked Charlie's temple. This time, Teresa tightly shielded him. She raised her head, closed her eyes. She was prepared to sacrifice everything. And yet, I couldn't help but wonder. Since when has the person she cared for so tenderly no longer been me? Forget it. Nothing makes sense anymore. I let go of my fist. Powerlessly, I walked towards the house. On the TV cabinet, I took down the ring that had been hidden for a long time. The diamond shimmered under the direct light, dazzlingly bright, amplifying the shock and embarrassment to the extreme. In front of Teresa, I threw it into the trash can. Calmly, I said, let's break up. Her expression gradually stiffened, slowly raising her gaze. Her lips trembled faintly. No. It's not like this. We shouldn't be like this. She desperately threw herself on me, anxiously grabbing my hand. Howl, listen to me. It's my fault, I'm sorry. Can you forgive me, please? I truly love you. I can't be without you. Teresa reached out and held my face, attempting to offer a cheap kiss. But I was already exhausted, using all my strength to push her away and take steps to leave. She slumped to the ground. Howl. You're not allowed to leave. I won't let you leave me. How can you do this? A hysterical roar echoed behind me, turning into screams, wails, until finally, only sobbing remained. Countless times, I imagined, when the surprise of the proposal was revealed, how she would tear up with joy and shyness. Crying and laughing, saying, "I do." But now, all that's left is shock, without joy. Chapter 3. Returning to the dormitory, my roommates were heading out for their afternoon classes. I grabbed Lou and asked him to help me take a leave of absence. "Why do you look so pale?" He stopped and insisted on taking me to the hospital. "But what should I tell the doctor? That I feel nauseous? That I can't stop vomiting? I'm fine, I just need to get some sleep." "This doesn't look like fine at all. What's really going on?" Lou refused to back down and lifted me up. "I already told you I'm fine. Can you just leave me alone?" In a moment of frustration, I pushed him away, causing Lou to fall to the ground. He stared at me in disbelief for a long time. Finally, he said, "Rest well." I was alone in the dormitory. Finally, I could let myself cry in embarrassment. After my tears dried up, I fell into a restless sleep. I had a long dream, going back to the past. I saw Teresa downstairs, calling my name loudly, openly declaring her love for me. Freshman year was the most difficult for me. I performed poorly in the college entrance exam and barely got into a backup school. Then my father had an accident at work, narrowly avoiding becoming paralyzed. During those dark days, I often found myself standing by the river, on the verge of giving up. But it was Teresa who grabbed my sleeve and said, "How difficult is it to die? Such a good-looking body, what a waste. If you can't go on, I'll give you a goal, love me and let's see how long we can hold on." She was like the sun, radiating heat that I couldn't resist, illuminating my entire world. That love lasted for 3 years, now that I think about it. The way I was back then, she was willing to come down to earth to embrace me. After 3 years have passed, how did things change? She loved my appearance, driven by lust. But when I fell into despair, she couldn't accept my brokenness. "Howell, are you feeling better?" I groggily opened my eyes, catching a glimpse of the darkening sky outside. Lou and the others had returned from class. "Teresa is looking for you, she's been waiting downstairs for a while." I glanced outside the window, not responding. The youngest, who was playing games, took off his headphones and sarcastically said, "Howell, please. Let me call you Dad, okay? Hurry down, Teresa has been blowing up our phones." My heart sank. I felt sorry for all the disturbances over the years. I hurriedly made my way downstairs. Teresa's eyes were still swollen. Now they were filled with a sea of red, like the petals of a dripping flower. Suddenly, I remembered the coquettish way she used to speak to me. She called it teary-eyed makeup. A move that was charming and irresistible, no one could escape it. She came forward and grabbed my hand, whispering softly, "Howell, are you still mad at me?" I slightly turned my body, discreetly avoiding her touch. "We've already broken up." She paused for a moment and let go of my hand. She handed me a big bag. "Aren't you busy looking for a job lately? How can you manage without these? I've never even worn the suits I bought for you. And this tie, I specially had it custom made." Over the years, Teresa always enjoyed dressing me up like a doll. I used to think it was an unstoppable expression of love. Until she repeatedly threw away my so-called ordinary clothes, openly sharing them with her girlfriends as a joke. That's when I realized, I was just her plaything when she was bored. Thinking about this, I couldn't help but let out a soft sigh. "I'm not worthy, I'm better off in the trash can." Her expression quietly stiffened. Perhaps she thought I would never know how she entertained herself behind my back. "Howell, all I want now is to be with you. Don't you want to get married? I promise you, let's register tomorrow." How ridiculous. It seems like the only one who wanted to get married was me. Ignoring my retreat, she insisted on holding my hand. The perfectly timed tears stained her carefully prepared makeup. "Howell, I've let go of everything to win you back. With so many people here, are you really willing to make me suffer?" The crowd gradually gathered around us. Just like when she confessed her love to me back then. I thought her love was intense. She knew exactly that I couldn't refuse. But now, everything has changed. "Teresa, let me say it one last time, we've broken up. I hope you won't harass the people around me anymore." After saying that, I turned and walked towards the building. "Howell, if you take one more step, we're really done." No matter how furious and unreasonable she became, throwing a tantrum. This time, I resolutely walked away. When I returned to the dormitory, everyone pretended as if nothing had happened and went back to their places. Lou secretly glanced at me, wanting to say something but hesitating. In the end, I spoke first. Lou, I still owe you for that electric scooter. When I initially planned to propose, Lou went against everyone's opinions. He even lent me his own electric scooter for transportation. Now, saving money had lost its meaning. I took out some money and transferred it to Lou. I'll pay you the original price. At this point, brothers understand everything without needing to say much. Lou firmly embraced my shoulder. Brother, tonight, we won't return until we're drunk. That night, we brought back 3 boxes of beer. And in my dreams, for the first time, I didn't worry about money. Chapter 4. Without the plan of working part-time, I had a lot of free time. I immersed myself in the library. Day and night, preparing for the civil service exam. Occasionally, my eyes would ache from solving problems, and when I looked up, I would see couples flirting and teasing each other. It reminded me so much of the past. In a daze, a cup of latte was placed on my desk. The lid had a familiar cat drawing on it. Your favorite, iced, extra milk, less sugar. Teresa pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. Naturally, as if we were old friends. You're still the same, liking to sit by the window. Howell. Do you still have feelings for me? It had been a month since we last saw each other, and Teresa had lost weight. The dark circles under her eyes were clearly visible. I pushed the cup of latte back towards her. I actually can't drink coffee at all. It gives me stomach aches. She used to insist on having 2 different flavors every time. And I indulged her by accompanying her. As for the seat, wherever there is a seat, I'll sit there. You probably don't know how intense the competition for seats in the library is during finals, right? Teresa was taken aback, unable to hide her sadness in her eyes. She sniffled, pitifully pleading. I have to submit my opening report tomorrow, but since we've been apart, I can't even sleep properly. Howell, can you please help me? I knew Teresa loved to play around. In this past month, she had been staying up all night quite often. I used to be like an old father figure. Chasing after her, helping her study bit by bit. But I never expected that after we separated, she would indulge herself to this extent. I replied calmly, I'm busy, figure it out on your own. I didn't know before how thoughtful you were in analyzing things for me. It's only after losing you that I realize how precious it was. I remained indifferent and continued to focus on solving the problems. Can you let me take a look at your report? Whatever you want. I'll give it to you. She leaned closer to me, and her words suddenly became ambiguous. A sudden wave of nausea overwhelmed me. It turned out that in her eyes, I was only a convenient transaction at the right price. A nameless anger ignited within me instantly. What makes you think that just by snapping your fingers, I'll foolishly clean up your mess? Do you even deserve me? The sudden outburst frightened Teresa, leaving her pale-faced. The surrounding eyes focused on us, silently condemning. Just at that moment, Charlie appeared at the right time. He must have been waiting for this scene for a long time. He took the opportunity to put his arm around Teresa's shoulder, disdainfully saying, I told you not to go after him. What can a bookworm who only hangs out in the library do? As long as the money is there, you can buy any paper, right? If he wanted to show off in the library, he had definitely chosen the wrong place. The sudden indiscriminate attack made Charlie the target of everyone's anger. The classmates around me stood behind me, forming a protective barrier. I sneered, even if you buy them all, it won't matter. I'm afraid someone won't understand a single one. Charlie grabbed my collar angrily, you. But this time, Teresa stood in front of me. With a sudden slap, the sound echoed loudly in the library. Charlie, have you gone crazy enough? It's none of your business to interfere with us. If you dare to cause trouble for Howell again, I won't let it go. Under the angry reprimands of the crowd, Charlie slinked away. Before leaving, Teresa tugged my sleeve and lowered her head. Howell. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it the way you thought. Don't look at me like that. I just love you so much. But it's strange. I used to yearn for her to lower her head to me. Now, there's no turmoil in my heart. It seems that I finally no longer love her. So I won't hate her either. Chapter 5. After the interview, I headed to Tibet alone. A dream that remains unfulfilled. In front of the snow-white Potala Palace. Countless devout believers, taking step by step towards their faith. But I couldn't help but think back to the night when Teresa and I walked hand in hand towards the temple. At that time, my father was in the intensive care unit, fighting for his life. I stayed outside the ward, unable to eat for several days. I was no longer in a human shape. Finally, one day, Teresa couldn't bear it anymore. She lifted me onto her motorcycle. The wind howled in my ears, as if it could take away all the troubles. We rode together, finally stopping at the foot of Dancy Mountain in the west of the city. She said, "Let's go, since you don't want to live anymore, let's go and pray to Guan Yin, exchanging one life for another." So we really took 5 steps and knelt, 3 steps and bowed. From the foot of the mountain to the top, the sky was faintly brightening. Miraculously, after that day, my father really recovered from the danger. Everything gradually got better. Howl. In a daze, I snapped back to reality. I turned around, and Teresa was standing behind me. "You actually made it to Tibet after all." For a moment, I was puzzled. But in a matter of seconds, I understood everything. There is nothing that Miss Wu cannot obtain. Especially a simple travel arrangement. "Howl, can we start over?" That day, I made a vow to the Bodhisattva that we would be together forever. But now, why isn't it coming true? I almost believed her. If I hadn't accidentally overheard her phone call. She said, how romantic it would be. Even I would fall in love with myself. This time, Howl will definitely be mine. She clearly only loves herself. But she deceived both of us for so many years in the name of love. Until the end. Even she started to believe it was true. With the last bit of patience, I said to her, "I beg you. Let the memories remain pure as they were. Don't make me regret loving you." This is not the ending she imagined. Teresa asked in a daze, "We can't go back, can we?" Silence speaks volumes. But she still held on to hope, persistently waiting for an answer, until she couldn't bear it anymore, squatting down and crying in anguish. "Howl, I'm sorry. I loved you so much. How did I lose you?" But it's truly laughable. Her genuine embarrassment is real. Her regret and remorse are real. Only her love for me, as she claimed, was so insincere. A week after returning from Tibet, Teresa and Charlie made it official. In the photos, there was a close-up of a sparkling diamond ring. But at that time, I was busy undergoing physical examinations and political reviews. I only found out when Lou mentioned it. That night, Teresa messaged me. "I'm sorry. Now I walk firmly on my own path, smooth sailing. But I still can't bring myself to say it's okay." That was 3 years of my wasted youth. No one is worthy of erasing all grievances with just a smile. Chapter 6. I saw Teresa again over a month later, during the defense of our graduation thesis. Her figure seemed slightly plumper. She did well in buying her thesis, it was indeed of a high standard. Unfortunately, it was put together hastily and lacked proper preparation. She couldn't answer any of the committee's questions. Naturally, she failed to pass. Strangely enough, Teresa, who always cared about her reputation, didn't struggle this time. The next day, I received an unexpected invitation from Teresa's father. After repeatedly declining, he eventually drove to the dormitory entrance. It had a sense of this as my last attempt. His villa is located on the heart-shaped island in the city center. Most of the residents were either wealthy or prestigious. Thinking back to my first visit, I wanted to save some money on transportation. I ended up getting lost in the neighborhood. Now, looking at it again, it felt desolate. "Howl, I heard you performed exceptionally well during the defense, becoming an outstanding graduate. You're truly young and promising. Unlike me, an old man. I don't expect much, I just hope my foolish daughter can find a good place to belong." Teresa's father began with pleasantries. Seemingly praising, but there was an underlying meaning in his words. "If you have something to say, just say it." His heavy hand covered mine. "Are you willing to go abroad with Teresa? As long as you agree, I guarantee that both of you will live without worries for the rest of your lives." To be honest, I was somewhat surprised. Was Teresa's previous announcement all just a playful act? Teresa's father casually glanced upward. Only then did I notice Teresa hiding in the corner. Despite her efforts to conceal it, I could still see her slightly protruding belly. It turns out that my perception of her being plumper that day wasn't a misconception. I finally understood the purpose of this grand banquet. "Uncle, I respect you as an elder, but you can't treat me as a scapegoat, can you? Damn it." Teresa's father, exposed, immediately turned red with anger. He angrily smashed the teacup to pieces. Just like before. On that mid-autumn festival, Teresa impulsively brought me home for a dinner. I carefully selected a bottle of red wine as a gift. But Teresa's father accidentally let it slip from his hands when receiving it. He said, "Sorry, it slipped. But this wine. Spilled is spilled, it's just a pity for my Turkish carpet worth over 100,000. I stood there, at a loss for words, with my ears burning. Teresa immediately took me away from home. I thought she was feeling sorry for me. But once we were out of the house, she bent over laughing. Did you see how crazy the old man got? If I knew, I would have brought you back earlier. Seeing my expression change, she hurriedly apologized. I was just joking. You see, our positions are so drastically different. Not to mention love? I probed, with the alliance between your family and the Charlie family, both families benefited. Now that the marriage plan has fallen apart, I wonder who is the carpet and who is the wine? Teresa's father's face instantly turned as black as charcoal. It seemed that, as rumored, there were indeed issues with the funds of Teresa's father's conglomerate. He threatened in anger, "Don't underestimate me. Even if my family's business collapses, as long as I say the word, I can cut off your path." Is that so? I responded with a faint smile. Then I'd like to see if your hand can reach into the territory of the Economic Investigation Brigade. By then, the public notice period had passed, and the contract had already been signed. I had become an honorable civil servant. I watched as Teresa's father's pupils trembled. From shock to the death of his heart, Teresa stumbled after me, her hand carefully covering her small belly. "Howell, if I say that our marriage was forced, would you believe it? You promised to love me forever, were all those words fake?" I paused my steps. An infinite sense of desolation arose within me. The once radiant and glorious sun had ultimately fallen into the quagmire. I carried my burden, making a final farewell to those 3 years of youth. May we be healthy and never meet again. The issues with Teresa's father's conglomerate had made headlines long ago. If we were to meet again, perhaps it would be in the courtroom. Chapter 7. I didn't expect the reunion to come so soon. It was on the day I was interning as a reporter. Teresa's father was officially summoned for investigation. By the time Teresa hurriedly arrived, she couldn't catch a glimpse of her father. When she saw me, it was as if she had grasped the last straw of salvation. "Howell, will I never see my father again? Can you help me? I just want to see him one more time." In a daze, I seemed to see myself struggling years ago. But the line between black and white was clear, the boundaries distinct. No matter how much it touched me, I couldn't overstep. "Go back for now, there will be a way." But she stubbornly struggled at the door, crying until she fainted. Suddenly, a cry came from the crowd. Only then did I notice the glaring blood flowing down her leg. That was the first time I felt it. The departure of a vibrant life, in just a fleeting moment. All joys and sorrows, all grudges and kindness became insignificant. I frantically dialed the emergency number, trying to grasp Teresa's last thread of life before the gates of death. Fortunately, there was still time. When Teresa woke up, it was already the second night. "Is Teresa's family here?" The nurse anxiously called out in the corridor. I stood up and entered the room. Under Teresa's expectant gaze, I ultimately didn't respond as a family member. She murmured, "Howell, I have nothing left. I only have you." But I no longer belonged to her. Just like she never truly belonged to me. I slowly let go of her hand that she reached out to me. "Teresa, you saved my life back then. Now, I'm returning it to you. We're even." Teresa looked at me incredulously, silent for a long time. Finally, she smiled with relief. In the end, she chose to let go. 3 years ago, Howell was young and ignorant. He didn't understand. Love can take many forms. But it can never be pity or indebtedness. However, 3 years later, Teresa, through tears and sadness, realized this cruel truth. After that day, I consciously requested a transfer from the investigation team for this case. I have seen Teresa a few times at the bureau. Each time, it was brief and hurried. She seemed to have matured overnight, becoming strong and resilient, working tirelessly for her father. Occasionally, our eyes would meet, we would only nod slightly and quickly look away. Everything went as I wished. We became complete strangers who knew each other best. Chapter 8. July. The graduation ceremony arrived as scheduled. The campus became lively once again. Everyone wished each other well and took group photos. But around Teresa, there was no one. After the thesis incident, Teresa had to apply for an extension to graduate. Coupled with the troubles her family faced. In such occasions, I thought she wouldn't show up. But at the evening ball, the people who acted so righteous during the day completely discarded their masks. Under the guise of celebration, they poured glass after glass of red wine over Teresa's head. It was like a devil's carnival. But Teresa was such a proud person. She stood up in anger, raising her hand to return the humiliation. A loud slap. A fresh red mark was left on Teresa's face. The instigator was none other than Charlie. Well, isn't this my beloved Teresa? Why are you still so temperamental? This slap used to be your favorite, right? Just as another slap was about to land, I couldn't help but intervene, grabbing his wrist. Who do you think you are? My uncontrollable anger made Charlie even more deranged. He swung his left hand, attempting to punch this unexpected guest. Charlie, if I remember correctly, your family is also under investigation, right? With this punch, you might be charged with assaulting a public servant. Charlie's eyes widened, almost bursting into flames. But he was helpless. His punch landed on a nearby decorative column. Howell, we'll meet again in the future. But what can be done? He no longer has a future. After all, I can't tell him. The industry chain of buying and selling papers in his hands had long been exposed. It is currently under formal investigation. Perhaps for his family's power, this is not a big deal. But Charlie's father, knowing what he has done, allowed him to continue and even used it as an important part of the family's money laundering. The story had already reached an uncontrollable ending. Just as we faced off. I didn't know when Teresa had escaped from the scene. I followed and found her outside the venue. She was hiding in a corner, lost in thought. No matter how she wiped it, the red wine on her white dress remained vividly red. I pulled out a handkerchief and handed it to her. Clean your face first. You used to be so outspoken, but from now on, don't confront things head on. Teresa took the handkerchief, her eyes slightly reddened without leaving a trace. Suddenly, she tiptoed closer to me. In an instant, I instinctively moved my head aside. If there's a towel blocking your path, you would pick it up and throw it away, but you would never use it to wipe your mouth. Do you understand what I mean? Teresa's outstretched hand froze in midair. That was the first time I saw embarrassment on her face. I'm sorry for being presumptuous. She lowered her head and dared not meet my gaze again. She hurriedly escaped. Much later. Every time I think of those words, I regret not being able to speak properly, to bid farewell gracefully. How could I have known back then? Our youth, accompanied by sighs, came to an abrupt end. In this summer. Chapter 9. The last time I saw Teresa was 2 years after graduation. It was raining heavily that day. My wife was craving for some crayfish, so we ordered takeout late at night. But we waited for a long time, and the order was already far overdue. Finally, when the doorbell rang, I heard a familiar voice. I'm really sorry, the rain was too heavy and I had an accident, so. Following the voice, it was indeed Teresa. The oversized delivery uniform draped over her made her look exceptionally petite. The raincoat that didn't provide enough coverage was covered in muddy stains from the fall. And in her hands, she held the spilled crayfish, dripping with oil. When she saw me, Teresa anxiously lowered her head. I will compensate you for this order, but I hope you won't leave a bad review. My wife, feeling sorry for her, reached out and pulled her up. Oh my, you've scraped your skin, and you're worried about the crayfish. Saying that, she brought Teresa inside. But Teresa, like a startled rabbit, hurriedly tried to retreat towards the door. No need. My shoes aren't clean, I'll dirty your house. But with my wife's hot-tempered nature, how could she just let her go like that? Ignoring her modest retreat, she dragged her inside. Then she turned around and went back to the room to get some medicine. In the hallway, it was just the two of us, and the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. You actually bought a house here. As I looked in response, I noticed Teresa discreetly peeking at my house. It was quite a coincidence. This house and the one her family bought for her back then were in the same neighborhood. Even the layout of the apartment was exactly the same. I finally understood that she seemed to have misunderstood something. Quickly laughing it off, I said, I don't have that kind of capability. It just happened that I got lucky with the company's housing benefits. Teresa's eyes visibly dimmed. Finally, my wife came back with the bandages. She carefully unwrapped them and applied the medicine to Teresa's wounds. She couldn't help but nag, it's not easy for a girl to do this kind of work. You must be careful at night. Speaking of which, my husband used to deliver takeout too. It's said that he even injured his ex-girlfriend's leg back then. My wife joked, not realizing that Teresa's eyes were quietly turning red. Tears, the size of beans, fell uncontrollably. My wife panicked. Why are you crying? I'm sorry, did I say too much? Teresa hurriedly wiped away the tears from her face. She tried hard to suppress her sobbing. I'm fine. It's just been so long since someone cared about me like this. Thank you. After saying that, she quickly ran away, leaving behind a fragile figure in the dark. Everything happened so quickly. Before my wife could recover, she buried herself in my embrace, feeling wronged. Honey, did I do something good-hearted that ended up causing trouble again? I lovingly stroked her head and reassured her, of course not. Perhaps it's because of your kindness that she can make it through the difficult winter. Later, at a class reunion, I happened to hear the news that Charlie had been released from prison. When the truth came out, Charlie became the family's scapegoat, shouldering all the blame. Because of academic fraud, he spent a long time in prison. He never obtained his degree. After his release, he faced numerous setbacks and had no way out. In the end, he could only escape abroad in a hurry, completely disappearing without a trace. And Teresa, she completely vanished from people's sight as well. As time passed by, those people and events from our youth would eventually blur. But I never forgot that summer by the riverside. The bold and dazzling girl who saved me.